All right, ladies and gentlemen, the voice of reason coming to you live. Today, we're going to talk about Donald Trump and his speech regarding the Second Amendment and Hillary Clinton. We're going to talk about Michael Phelps and whether or not we believe that he is the greatest Olympian of all time. But first, we're going to talk about a very fun story. We're going to talk about something that I think most people don't want to talk about on the air live. Most people wouldn't mess with, and that is how long is sex supposed to last? I got this article from the Associated Press, and they say the average female would prefer it to last exactly 7.5 seconds. 7.5 seconds. Now, I'm a gamer, and a lot of guys that I know are curious about these things because mostly guys play video games, let's face it. There are some girls, and we appreciate you guys playing with us, but mostly it's the guys. So there's a lot of times where I'm with the guys and we're having a conversation about stuff like this, and we think that it's supposed to be like a 20-minute marathon, 30 minutes, something like that. And really, apparently, the scientists have found out 7.5 minutes. Now, I mean, that seems like a likely number to me. And the reason I say that is because that's not counting the things leading up to the actual act. That's not counting all the, touching and everything like that that goes on. And I think most guys think that they have to do way more than they do. But in all reality, it's a lot simpler if you go about it, with the whole foreplay and everything like that. It's a lot easier to do these things than most guys would think, especially if they've never, either not done it or haven't done it a lot enough to know what they're doing. Um, I don't know. I found that article interesting because, I was in a conversation with a buddy of mine not too long ago, and he asked me how long did he think it was supposed to last, or did I think it was supposed to last? And I said, I don't know, like 15, 20 minutes. And that's what an average guy would think, because this is a conversation I have, given that I play video games, like I said, and most guys talk about these things. And I don't know. I just found that article interesting that it's only 7.5 minutes for women. It's a lot less than I thought. It's a lot less than most guys would think. So hey, if you're having to go longer than that, you're messing up, dude. You got to do the little things, as they always say. Now we're gonna talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Donald. As my buddy Dub would say, we're gonna do it for Donnie. Unfortunately, this time Donnie did it to himself. Donald Trump recently, this last week, said that the people who know the Second Amendment can do something about Hillary Clinton. And it basically stemmed from a conversation he was having with a bunch of his followers. They were gathered at a rally, and he said that it's going to be a real shame if Hillary gets elected and can pick her own judges because she's going to try to abolish the Second Amendment. And basically, he says that those who understand the Second Amendment can do something about Clinton, which, you know, even if you don't try to read into it, sounds a lot like he's saying, hey, some of you guys could shoot her. Because the Second Amendment, as you all know, is the right to bear arms. Now, when I first heard this quote, I actually heard, on CNN, and I was watching it, and I says to myself, like, wait a minute, isn't the Second Amendment the one that says you can use firearms? And I looked it up because I knew I was going to do this podcast today. And sure enough, uh, I was right. And that guy has been in a lot of backlash about this sort of thing for a while, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, talking about people. He's done a lot, but the real scenario is he has to learn how to control himself. Um, there's a big possibility, and I hate to admit this because as you guys know, I'm not a very big Donald Trump supporter. There's a very big possibility that he could wind up being the president of the United States. And that scares me quite frankly because he has not shown me the ability to keep calm. When he starts talking, he really flies off the handle and says a lot of ludicrous things. And that scares me because if you're in a debate or you're in a discussion rather with foreign leaders from other countries, it just and I said foreign from other countries, but if you're in a discussion with people from other countries that are leaders, they're going to expect you to conduct yourself in a certain way. Donald Trump has not instilled in me the confidence that he's able to, exude that type of restraint in himself. I also watched this week an episode of the show Chelsea on Netflix, and there was a guy, David Axelrod, who was the Obama administration, you know, one of the cabinet members there, and he said that when he was talking to Saddam Hussein, he accidentally showed Saddam Hussein the soles of his feet. He had shoes on, but apparently in the Islamic, I don't know if it's all Islamic, but in the Iraqi culture, showing someone the soles of your feet is a great insult. Now, as an American, that may not mean a lot to you, but you have to be able to understand these other places and other cultures, and you have to be able to respond accordingly. You can't just fly off the handle and say and do things and, not really care about the consequences of what's coming out of your mouth or the things that you're doing. And so far, Trump has really showed me that he doesn't care what he says, how he says it, how it's taken, or anything for that matter about what he's got going on. I know people that say to me, oh, he doesn't really want to be president. He's just using this to help further his businesses. But guess what? He's the Republican nominee. He's picked as vice president. At this point, it's pretty much time for him to realize I got to start taking this thing seriously. I've got to start being a candidate that people can look at and feel like there's some sort of level of confidence in. And right now, I haven't seen that. All right, the next thing we're going to cover is Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps, arguably the greatest Olympian of all time, 27 career medals, 22 career gold medals, 13 career individual gold medals. Wow, that's a lot. I mean, he's been in several Olympics. I believe this is his third Olympics. That's a lot for an Olympic athlete. There are talks that he may come back again next year, or excuse me, the next cycle, which would be 4 years from now, and do it all again. If he does, he could extend his records because everything I told you about previously was a record for the most medals, golds, team medals, everything. He holds all that for the Olympics. Is he the greatest? Is there anyone that could come close to Michael Phelps? I don't know. I don't think so. Looking at his resume, he's the most decorated athlete at the Olympic Games history. You have to respect that. And what's really interesting about Michael Phelps is this is a guy that almost didn't make it to the Olympics. He almost didn't get to the point where he was the greatest athlete of all time, in contention for. He almost didn't make it. He almost fizzled out after the London Olympics as well. This is a guy who got, had the marijuana incident. He had the thing where he had a DUI. He had several things. And one of the other things that was going on with Michael Phelps was that he didn't have a good relationship with his father. You know, as any man knows that his relationship with his father is very important. Even women, that your relationship with your father and your mother are very important at all times. But for Michael Phelps, this was especially true because as his relationship with his father deteriorated, so did his life. Ray Lewis, Baltimore native, or not native, but Baltimore hero. He played for the Ravens for a long time. He was even in contact with Michael Phelps to try to guide him to the path. You know what I mean? To get him on the right track after his, seemingly endless amount of troubles that happened to him, during that time span between, after the London Olympics and now to Rio. I mean, this was a guy that almost didn't make it. You know what I mean? This was a guy that was literally one or two incidents away from being thrown away from the American conscience. You know, and I think that he's a good feel good story. That here's a guy that can struggle, can pull himself up, can go to rehab, can do the right things, can get a family, can reconcile with his father, can do all the things that a guy in his position needed to do, and still win the most Olympic medals of all time. That's wonderful. That's something that's special for him. This is something that he can tell his son, who he just had a son recently named Boomer. Uh, I believe that this is something that his son can be proud of for him. Uh, it's not about, as a man, how well you do. It's about what happens to you when you struggle. Are you able to pull yourself up, or are you going to sit there and wallow in your self pity and not be able to bring yourself up by your bootstraps, or do something to try to get yourself going again? A lot of times, that's what you see. A lot of times, there's guys that can't do the right things. Johnny Manziel comes to mind when I say that. Johnny Manziel, all the talent in the world, drafted by the Cleveland Browns. He wasn't a top 20, he wasn't a top 10 pick. He wasn't that highly sought after because he had incidents, in Texas A&M where he went to college. But he was a first round draft pick. He was paid a lot of money. He had a great opportunity. He was a starter for Cleveland, but he just couldn't get himself right. Alcoholism is a demon. I've seen a lot of guys go through it. I've seen a lot of athletes go through it. Johnny Manziel hasn't been able to pull himself out of it yet. Michael Phelps did. Michael Phelps got back in touch with his father. Like I said before, asked the guidance of Ray Lewis, who's a deeply spiritual man, and he got himself on the right track. And that's great, you know. Another thing I want to talk about, which we'll talk about after our break here, is my friend Ethan has a question for me. And that question is, what do I feel are the three biggest problems in the United States? I'm going to talk about that when we come back from break.